Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily, R. Kelly's ex-girlfriend takes the stand against him. The R&B singer accused of forcing the woman and Aaliyah to have abortions. And case closed. The officer who shot Ashli Babbitt during the Capitol riots is officially cleared of any wrongdoing.
You have to ask, did the officer act with reasonable force given what was presented to him?
Plus, Robert Durst's explanation for everything.
Well, I'm not a normal person.
The real estate heir under cross-examination accused in the murder of his best friend and disappearance of his first wife. Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. We begin with R. Kelly's trial and the explosive testimony about alleged lies, rapes, and forced abortions. Jane Doe 5 was back on the stand for the second day of testimony. Her testimony dove deeper into her allegations of alleged rape, transporting a minor, and abortions. Jane Doe 5, who met R. Kelly when she was 17 years old in 2015, lived with him until 2019, allegedly being flown all over the country for him. She testified that there were rules to be followed, like wearing baggy clothes, and when some rules were broken, like speaking to his other girlfriends about the relationship, she was punished by being forced to have sex with a man named Nephew without her consent. She also testified that R. Kelly coaxed her into lies to her family on the phone, in fake letters, and even when being interviewed by CBS's Gayle King, prior to her moving out in October of 2019. Jane Doe 5 told the jury about an Ask Me Anything conversation where R. Kelly allegedly told her and others that Aaliyah was pregnant and needed a certificate to possibly get an abortion. And other than her parents, the only other person that could go with her was her spouse. All this came out in direct. Cross-examination will soon follow. Joining us today is criminal defense attorney Bernarda Villalona and Terry Austin. Bernarda, Jane Doe 5 gave us a greater detail of R. Kelly's alleged abuse. Is there anything the defense can do against these powerful testimony?
So, Brian, there's a lot that the defense can do, but we have to focus on Jane Doe number 5. She is so important to this case. She's important because out of the racketeering acts, which there are 11, she's named in 4 of them. And aside from that, also as to the counts of the Mann Act, she is also the primary victim in 4 of those counts, which took place here in New York. I think the way for the defense to attack this, not that I'm condoning any of this, is number one, go for credibility. Argue, was this consensual, this behavior, or did it just not happen? Or I think, which is their strongest argument, is to argue that this case does not fall under the RICO statute of racketeering organizations, corrupt organizations act.
Yeah, of course, those are all different aspects, but let's touch on the one part that Bernarda touched on, Terry, and that's credibility. Because, you know, Duranda Pace, Aaliyah, and now Jane Doe 5, the allegations all seem to be consistent when talking about alleged abuse. Credibility being everything for these types of cases. What did you make of Jane Doe 5's direct?
I thought she was extremely credible, and her testimony is exactly consistent with Duranda Pace. She was saying some of the exact same things. She said that he was violent, he was controlling. He checked her phone to see what she was actually saying to her friends. She had to get permission, she said, to go to the restroom, and sometimes she even had to urinate in a cup. So I think that, you know, she was extremely credible. She cried on the stand, and the fact that she was so young when this occurred, I think the jury is going to take her testimony and couple it with what they've heard so far, and I think at the end of the day, it's going to be very credible.
Yeah, and Jane Doe number 5, don't forget, lived with R. Kelly for I think about 4 years, again, from 2015 to 2019. And a lot of these allegations seem to span that time and go into really details. You brought it up, Terry, about the urinating, but also I think I heard something about eating feces or something along those lines. The more grotesque some of these allegations get, Terry, is it going to be harder for them to say this was consensual but just went too far?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's definitely going to be difficult to defend those types of actions.
Yeah, especially when I think you juxtapose the age and the lack of consent. I understand the parents are involved to some degree, but it's going to be a tough road for the defense to travel. Thank you both. Turning now to more top legal news and an update on the disappearance of Colorado mom Susan Morphew. A judge will decide if there is probable cause for her husband to stand trial for her murder. Barry Morphew is accused of killing his wife Suzanne on Mother's Day 2020. An FBI agent testified that during an interview 10 months later, Morphew asked, "What about immunity? Can you give me immunity if I just sit and open my life up to you?" Prosecutors say the Morphew's marriage was on the rocks and Suzanne was having an affair with another man. Barry Morphew reportedly kept a tranquilizer gun and dates in their home. Agents say that gun was fired on the last day Suzanne was seen alive. Morphew denies it was. And an unused .22 caliber round was found next to the couple's bed. Switching gears to California, where a preliminary hearing is underway for the accused killers of college student Kristen Smart. An FBI agent says he planted a jailhouse informant to try to get Paul Flores to confess. Flores was the last person to see Smart at Cal Poly in 1996. For years, investigators suspected Flores. But unable to find her body, he was not charged until this past April. Now, investigators believe Flores killed Smart in her dorm room. His father, Ruben Flores, is accused of helping him cover up the crime. Flores never confessed and maintains his innocence. Rapper Tory Lanez was ordered to pay out for violating a restraining order against fellow rapper Megan Thee Stallion. A judge increased Tory Lanez's bail to $250,000 on Monday. Tory Lanez is accused of making a surprise visit at a music festival just after Megan Thee Stallion left the stage. The judge warned Tory Lanez that he faces more than 22 years in prison for allegations of shooting Megan Thee Stallion in the foot. Lanez apologized and posted his increased bail. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, will prosecutors catch Robert Durst in yet another lie? But first, the Capitol riots, a decision for the officer accused of shooting and killing Ashli Babbitt. Inside the investigation after the break.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTubeTV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTubeTV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTubeTV. We put you in the jury box.
Welcome back. A U.S. Capitol police officer will not be disciplined after he shot and killed a woman during the U.S. Capitol riots. Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy is here with more on this now closed case.
Yeah, Brian, there was an outcry, you'll recall, from some people after that Capitol police officer shot and killed Ashli Babbitt. She was not armed, but now Capitol Police say that officer has been officially cleared.
On January 6th, surveillance video captured a throng of people, including Air Force veteran Ashli Babbitt, forcing their way into the Capitol. A police officer fired, killing Babbitt. Capitol Police now say that officer will not be disciplined. Former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi on the finding.
It suggests to me that the level of evidence that was gathered by the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office must have been pretty significant, because they administrative folks in the Department of Office of Professional Responsibility, they concluded that there wasn't even enough for the lower burden to find administrative problems with this officer.
In a press release, Capitol Police wrote, "The actions of the officer in this case potentially saved members and staff from serious injury and possible death from a large crowd of rioters who forced their way into the U.S. Capitol." It went on to say the officer's actions were consistent with the officer's training and USCP policies and procedures. The killing of Ashli Babbitt drew a strong reaction from some who were sympathetic to those who stormed the building. But Rossi says the question that has to be answered was whether the officer's use of force was reasonable and whether he feared for his life and the lives of others.
The death of Ashli Babbitt is a tragedy under any circumstances. It's a tragedy. Her life was taken. Sadly, there was a mob in front of that door that led to the area of the chamber of the House of Representatives. The door and the glass were being broken and smashed, and this is a tragic result of that action by the mob.
An attorney for Ashli Babbitt's family released a statement disagreeing, of course, with the findings of U.S. Capitol Police and that attorney called the shooting rather unjustified. In April, federal prosecutors determined that the officer who shot Ashli Babbitt would not face criminal charges. Brian?
Thanks, Anjanette. Let's bring back criminal defense attorney Bernardo Villalona and Terry Austin to discuss. Terry, I can understand why there would not be any legal charges or discipline, but could this have been a situation where non-deadly force should have been used?
You know what, Brian? I agree 100% with what Gene Rossi just said. It's a tragic situation, and whenever you can, you should use force that doesn't result in the death of another person. But here, we have to look at what was in this officer's mind and also in the minds of the other officers who were involved. If, in fact, they thought their lives were in danger, and we know for a fact that they did, then we can't say that this was either illegal or that it violated the policy of the police. And we know that Brian Sicknick was one of the individuals who was killed in this instance. So I think that the conclusion was a reasonable conclusion. Obviously, it was a tragic result. But the fact that we did have a police officer who died, we had people who were storming and breaking windows, I think it was the right result at the end of the day.
Now, Bernardo, you know decisions create precedents. Do you think not prosecuting this officer and not disciplining him is the right decision?
So I definitely think this was the right decision. You got to think that when it talks about bringing charges to any individual, including this officer, that the prosecutor's office, the Department of Justice, has to look at all the facts, because in the end, it's not about getting a conviction, but more of seeking justice. And based on their evaluation of all the evidence, they were led to believe that they could not prove that this officer acted with any kind of malice or with intent to cause the death of this individual, but rather that his actions were justified and that a jury will find as such. Every case is different. You look at the facts, and that's what's going to happen to any other cases that come up in the future. However, this will be a point of reference. But we know that January 6th wasn't your ordinary day, and we don't predict that will be happening again.
Let's hope not. And Jeanette, what do you know about the officer who fired at Ashli Babbitt?
You know, Brian, we really don't know a whole lot. The U.S. Capitol Police are not releasing that officer's name. In that press release that they put out, they said that the officer and the officer's family had received many threats. So obviously there is a concern for his safety and the safety of his family. Also, Ashli Babbitt's family really doesn't know much either. They are actually suing to get more information about that officer.
All right, we'll see how that civil suit continues, but I guess his name is probably going to be kept under hush for quite some time. Thank you all. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, to dig or not to dig. The note Robert Durst admits to writing that police say explains how his wife vanished decades ago. Does his explanation make sense? You decide. Next. Welcome back. We look to California, where Robert Durst finally has an explanation for the infamous dig note found in his home shortly after his wife disappeared. Town dump, bridge, dig, boat, other, and shovel. This list of peculiar items was found in Robert Durst's trash can shortly after his wife, Kathy, went missing in 1982. While Durst is currently on trial for the murder of his best friend, Susan Berman, Durst is also accused of murdering his first wife. But he's never been charged with Kathy's murder because her body has not been found. The notorious dig note caused a lot of speculation over the years, since these items could be linked to disposing of a body. Now, we finally get an explanation.
This looks like a list of how you would get rid of a body.
That's what it looks like to you. It does not look like that to me at all. They would see it says town dump, which was my reference that I was going to tell the high school kids who took care of the house to take our rotting sailboat to the town dump. DIG is for digital. I had brought the MS-DOS Microsoft Controls book with the computer, which I was planning to work on. Shovel with the snow shovels, and I had asked the high school kids who were going to get rid of the sailboat at the dump to buy 2 snow shovels.
Back to break down another day of Durst's cross-examination is criminal defense attorney Bernardo Villalona and co-host Terry Austin. Terry, this seems like a bizarre note however you read it, but is it a stretch for the prosecution to say this is proof of Kathy's disappearance?
I think Lewin has a great inference here. This list definitely looks like it's one of the things that he's putting together to try to figure out how to make his wife's body disappear. I mean, it all makes sense. Shovel, getting rid of this boat, that makes no sense to me. But it's just one of many inferences. One of the other inferences that Lewin is asking the jury to do is to think about when he went to Caldor's shortly after his wife's death. The fact that perhaps, like he did with Morris Black, he is shopping for items to help him dispose of the body. And don't forget about that blue light. He has said that that might have been when he was actually dismembering the body. The neighbor saw the light on for 2 days straight. So I think these are good inferences, and I think because we have had so many lies from Durst that for a fact, the jury is going to think about these inferences.
Now, Bernardo, Durst dug deep into his bag of excuses for this one, but did it sound credible to you?
Not at all, Brian. He dug so deep. Actually, he was staring. If you noticed that when he was going through that list, he did not blink once. Look, the jury, I think with this one, since it's so apparent that those items are items that can be used in order to get rid of the body. And we already know that Durst has experience with getting rid of a body because guess what? He dismembered Robert Black and Morris Black, and he had to admit to it. So we all know that already. And the timing of when this list came out after she disappears, yeah, okay, Durst.
Yeah, I'm smirking because my mom definitely knows that blank stare of trying to find an excuse for what you did and why. I think that's a common thing that many people do when they're trying to lie or find something. I don't know what the jury's going to believe, but that dig note was beyond me. Of course, we'll continue to follow the Robert Durst trial. Law&Crime's got you covered for gavel-to-gavel coverage. When we come back, Robert Durst's story still doesn't add up. His claim that the killer was still in the house when he discovered Susan Berman dead. More on how his claims contradicts prior testimony. Welcome back. We're continuing our coverage of Robert Durst's trial and his shocking claims on the stand, now saying he thinks Susan Berman's killer was in her house when he discovered her body. Robert Durst is on trial for the murder of his best friend, Susan Berman. Durst discovered Berman was shot in the head in her Beverly Hills home in December 2000. Durst claims he fled the scene, fearing he would get framed for the murder. Instead of calling the cops, Durst sent the infamous cadaver note to lead the police to discover Berman's body. Earlier, under direct examination, Durst claimed that Susan's body was cold when he found it. Now, Durst says he thinks the killer was still in the house when he arrived. On cross, prosecutor John Lewin noticed that those two stories don't exactly add up.
I believe the killer was either still in the house or in the yard when I arrived.
Mr. Durst, haven't you testified that Susan's body was cold?
I did not testify that Susan's body was cold. Her breath felt, her face felt cold.
She's dead. What do you mean her breath felt cold? Was she breathing on you when you got there?
No, she was not breathing.
So how can her breath be cold when she's dead? She's a stiff.
I put my hand on her face and it was cold.
You said her face was cold, correct?
Correct.
If her face was cold, Mr. Durst, would you agree that even though you're not a forensic pathologist, that would indicate she'd been dead for some period of time? Would you agree?
I don't know whether a period of time is 5 minutes or an hour or 2 hours.
So it's your position that she might have been only dead for 5 minutes, her face is cold, and that the killer is still in the house. Is that what you're telling this jury?
Correct.
Prosecutors also asked Durst about his missing wife, Kathy, and why he didn't check with her family before reporting her as missing.
Isn't it true that you called the precinct to report Kathy missing before you called her family members to find out if they had heard from her?
I called the precinct to find out how to report a missing person.
But Mr. Durst, wouldn't the first thing you would do before you call the police, wouldn't the first thing you would do is you would call Kathy's family, her mom, her sisters, her brother, and find out, hey, listen, has anybody seen Kathy? Isn't that what a normal person does?
Well, I'm not a normal person. I am told that I am somewhere on the autistic spectrum. I don't know what a normal person does.
Bernardo, Law and Crime has the only cameras in the Durst trial, and so we get great insight, like the fact that jurors are not as attentive as yesterday's cross. Could Lewin be losing his jurors with this long cross-examination?
It's quite possible because this cross-examination has been going on for hours, actually for days. And Mr. Lewin did say earlier this morning that he'd probably be cross-examining Durst until next week. At some point, you really have to cut to the chase. What are the big issues you can get him to concede and keep it moving? Because this jury is not going to remember every inconsistency for the last over 20 hours already of Mr. Durst.
Yeah, he will not. Lewin will continue to go, I think, until every stone is unturned. Terry, what do you make of Durst's belief that the real killer was still in the house? Is that a reasonable doubt?
No, Brian, it is not a reasonable doubt. I don't think the jury is falling for that for a minute. It's been decades, and this is the first time we are hearing that someone else might have been into the house. And so I think Lewin was very smart to control the situation and say, but listen, you said her body was cold. Now you're saying that someone was in the house. So I definitely think he's caught in another lie here, and I think the jury is not falling for it.
Yeah, the question is, how many lies does Lewin want to catch him in before this cross-examination ends? We'll see how this story plays out. Thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.